The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 451. Get out! When Lindsay saw that Kiran had actually arrived, she was pleasantly surprised. However, considering the humiliation she faced earlier and the fact that he entered her bathroom just like that, she felt she had lost her dignity. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your body, Kiran said nonchalantly while glancing at Yvonne. Why are you here? I'm here to see my sister, Yvonne said, blushing. Kiran, get out of here. Lindsay was genuinely angry that Kiran treated her like she was invisible and even spoke to her with such disdain. Are you biological sisters? Kiran asked, staring at Yvonne. Yvonne lifted her head momentarily but quickly lowered her head again. She shook her head embarrassedly and said, I don't know. This is none of your business. Why do you care? Lindsay yelled again. Let's do a blood test, Kiran said bluntly. Go to hell. Lindsay picked up her shampoo bottle and threw it at Kiran. Kiran caught it effortlessly, looking at Yvonne. I'm worried that the sister you picked up is a fake, so I just wanted to help you verify it. Whatever you say. Yvonne nodded like an obedient little girl. We're not doing it. Lindsay wanted to at first, but she was so mad at Kiran that she refused him right away. I don't care what you say. Are you going to come out, or do you want me to pull you out? Kiran's gaze swept across her body. You. Lindsay was so embarrassed that her bloodshot eyes were filled with sadness. Get dressed. We'll go to the hospital to do a test. You can contact the hospital yourself, Kiran told Yvonne. He gave orders like he was the king, and he left. Kiran, you bastard! Lindsay was enraged, wondering what the hell Kiran was trying to do. How could he be so shameless? Yvonne looked at the enraged Lindsay and said, Sis, let's make him believe us once and for all. I'm just so angry, Lindsay said angrily. Wouldn't it be better if we weren't sisters? Yvonne did not explain, but she was implying that if they were not sisters, she could openly pursue Kiran. Lindsay's anger disappeared instantly, and it was replaced by hope. If she was not Yvonne's sister, she might really be able to be with Kiran. Snort! That bastard! Lindsay yelled angrily. She stood up and wrapped her body in a bath towel. When she came out, Kiran was no longer there, but the door to Yvonne's room was wide open. Lindsay knew that Kiran could not have any relationship with Yvonne, so instead of feeling upset, she was just hoping that they were not sisters. She started to get dressed. Yvonne returned to her room and saw Kiran on the sofa with a calm expression, so she said, Don't overwork yourself. I'm fine, Kiran said calmly. Okay. Yvonne nodded and started tidying up like a good wife. She would definitely make a good wife. She was not as volatile as Lillian, nor as arrogant and kind-hearted as Snow. She was more quiet and reserved. However, Kiran thought that she was strange since the moment he met her. He no longer cared about Yvonne's feelings because of the black magic. Yvonne did not seem suspicious of Kiran at all. She just acted naturally. I avenged your golden dragon today, said Kiran. You killed Simon? Yvonne stopped in her tracks and asked happily. Kiran nodded. I went to Nimbus Hollows and killed him. Thank you. Yvonne choked back her tears and a sad smile appeared on her face. Looking at her, Kiran had mixed feelings. The two of them fell into silence again. Less than 10 minutes later, Lindsay walked to the door and asked coldly, Are we leaving now? Kiran noticed that Lindsay changed into a white suit that outlined her sexy curves, but her eyes were filled with anger. Her high heels clacked on the ground so heavily that her fair feet were turning red, revealing her overwhelming anger and hatred toward him. Yvonne had not changed, so she still looked the same. Let's go. Kiran got up and they went down. The three of them left in their respective cars and rushed to the hospital. Kiran was in the lead, Lindsay was in the middle, and Yvonne was at the back. He saw Lindsay speeding up several times in the rearview mirror trying to overtake, but he blocked her every time. Yvonne followed behind like a little girl tagging along. Eventually, the three reached the hospital. The moment Kiran stopped to get out of the car, Lindsay floored the accelerator and tried to run him down. Kiran easily dodged her, but he did not bother provoking those women anymore. When they entered, a slimy doctor in white coat was already waiting for them in the lobby. The doctor looked like she was in her 20s. When she saw Yvonne, she walked over with a smile. Why do you want to do a parentage test when you don't have children? Jane, what are you talking about? Yvonne's cheeks turned red as if she had put on a layer of blush. Jane Watson was unbothered. She looked at Kiran and Lindsay behind and asked, Is the test for your friends? The test is for these two. Kiran pointed at Yvonne and Lindsay. Them? Jane exclaimed while looking at Kiran for confirmation. Yes, Kiran hugged Yvonne. My wife's health isn't well, so she can't give birth. Yvonne was shaking violently from his sudden embrace. She looked at him in surprise as she was not expecting that. Then Kiran hugged Lindsay with his other arm. This is her sister. If we're sure that they're biological sisters, we would like her to help us give birth. Kiran explained the reason calmly and naturally. Lindsay leaned into Kiran's arms, but instead of joy, she was ashamed. Was she really that worthless? She was her parents' precious daughter too, okay? We can do the test now. Kiran looked at Jane. Jane stared at Yvonne blankly, but she just nodded with a pale face, so Jane simply led the way. Kiran hugged Lindsay and let go of Yvonne. He felt chills out of nowhere, and it came with a strange feeling, or rather fear. It was coming from Yvonne. She was much more terrifying than Lindsay. Lindsay was filled with anger and pride, but Yvonne was filled with endurance and tolerance. To be able to wield the power of the fate spell with such tolerance made her seem all the more terrifying. Chapter. The four of them went to the laboratory, and Jane skillfully began to draw blood for the testing. Soon the results came out, and they were indeed the same blood type. Lindsay had mixed emotions. She was happy about it, but she was disappointed at the same time. If only they had different blood types. Yvonne was still quiet and accommodating. She was like water, gentle and accommodating to everything around it. Jane took their hair for testing, and when the results came out, they were 97% matched, which was relatively high. Lindsay's heart sank. Was she really going to become Kiran's sister-in-law? If that was the case, what was she going to do? What man would she end up with? Did she even have room for another man in her heart? Kiran was already her favorite. Compared to Lindsay's unstable emotions, Yvonne did not feel anything at all. Looking at the results, Kiran felt even more uneasy. Is there anything else you'd like to test? Jane looked at them and asked, implying that that was all they needed to be sure. Kiran, do you need anything else? Yvonne asked as if to reassure him. Nope. Kiran turned and walked out with a poker face. Lindsay and Yvonne were left there. Although Lindsay was angry about the result and Kiran's rudeness, she still hugged Yvonne after confirming that they were sisters, and she said tearfully, Sis, will you come home with me next time? Yvonne seemed excited. She hugged her back and nodded with teary eyes. By the time they walked out, Kiran had left. After returning to the hotel, they called Finn together. Finn was happy to hear that they had done the test and that she was 100% her daughter. He even cried on the video call. They were over the moon after their family reunion. Kiran drove around Bayville alone like a lonely, wandering soul. He wanted to go to the Quinn residence to verify it, but he decided against it. He was suspicious of Yvonne. Her excessive kindness seemed abnormal. How could a woman not even feel a little bit jealous? Without even realizing it, he made his way to Neptune's Cove. Looking upstairs, he heard the harp, so he got out of his car and went to Lillian's room. When he opened the door, he saw Lillian sitting there, steadily playing the harp, as calm as water. It was not like she did not go to Nimbus Hollows today and nothing happened. When did you come back? Kiran asked. Come and play for me. Instead of answering his question, she stepped aside. Kiran sat down and took a deep breath before he played a short while. You're not at ease, Lillian said. Kiran quickly dialed back his worries and concentrated on playing, but the second he made a sound. Stop! Your breathing isn't stable, Lillian shouted again. Kiran stopped and looked at Lillian. Stop playing. You'll make my ears bleed. Lillian turned her back to Kiran and looked out the window. Kiran did not continue playing, but he knew that she was right. He was indeed preoccupied. I just took Yvonne and Lindsay for a parentage test. They have the same blood type, and the similarity in their DNA was 97%. They're definitely biological sisters. Are you upset because you can't have both sisters? Lillian sneered. Kiran shook his head. No! Today, Margaret said that Lindsay's mother, Maxine, ruined my parents' marriage, and she scolded Lindsay for being shameless. I didn't know about that. Lillian was curious. Kiran nodded. She even mentioned the crescent pendant, and she said Maxine's name effortlessly, so it can't be a lie. You hate her parents, and now you're trapped under the love spell with Yvonne. That's one part of it. On the other hand, I'm starting to fear Yvonne. Since when do you get afraid? Lillian became curious, so she turned to look at Kiran and asked, Aren't you afraid of me? If you don't use those evil tricks on me, I'm not afraid of you, Kiran said frankly. Then why are you afraid of Yvonne? She's too calm and gentle. I don't think you can do that. Kiran met Lillian's eyes. Lillian was silent. Kiran's behavior would make her mood fluctuate, so it was indeed impossible for her to be like that. Tell me what's on your mind. Keep an eye on Imperial Dragon for me, and I'll kill them myself. Don't go too far. Don't forget that I'm also part of Imperial Dragon. I don't care. Kiran was firm. You're my sister, Kiran said, staring at Lillian's cold eyes. Hearing him call her sister, her anger subsided. When it comes to Imperial Dragon, listen to my instructions. Okay, but I'm afraid that if I'm in a bad mood and feel like killing someone, I'll kill someone from Imperial Dragon. Don't be so full of yourself. You're not just slaughtering chickens, Lillian warned. I don't want it to mess with Power Hub now. I'll have Lindsay build a hospital for me, and I'll develop it according to your instructions. Only then will I slowly take them down. What are you trying to say? Lillian was uninterested in these matters. I want to go to Maui with Yvonne, so you help me take care of Snow. Kiran finally told her his thoughts. Is it for your honeymoon? Lillian sneered. How is it a honeymoon when you're not there? Kiran smiled. Are you saying you want to have both of us? Lillian fake smiled while anger surged in her eyes. You're overthinking. Anything else? Lillian asked. If I kill Yvonne, will both of us die? Kiran asked all of a sudden. You want to kill her? Lillian was shocked. I'm scared of her, and I have a feeling it's not a good idea to keep her around. You're a doctor. Don't you know about the poison of the love spell? Lillian retorted. I just want to know if the threads of fate can save us, Kiran asked. I'm not sure. Lillian fell silent and looked at her closet. Before my mother died, she kept reminding me that we should master the 7th level of the Joyful Odyssey, but I don't know why. Master the 7th level of the Joyful Odyssey, Kiran repeated with doubtful eyes. I'm sure you know that this harp comes in a male and female pair, said Lillian. Kiran nodded. I'll practice it as soon as possible. Why do you trust me and not Yvonne? Lillian asked. Just a feeling, Kiran said frankly. Lillian did not say anything else. The word feeling kept echoing in her head. It was a simple word, yet it gave off the feeling of infinite affection and emotion. She would never kill Kiran. Go! I'll protect Snow. Thank you, sis, Kiran said gratefully. Lillian was quiet, but there was a hint of sorrow in her eyes. Kiran did not stay long as there were some things he could not bring himself to say. He was aware that the distance between him and Lillian was so close, yet so far. It was a complex telepathic connection. After leaving, Kiran drove to Bayville Hotel to look for Yvonne. Chapter 453. When he arrived at Yvonne's room, she was silently reading, dissociating herself from the outside world. You're here again? Although she was happy to see him, she did not show much change in emotion. Can the love spell be broken? Kiran went straight to the point. Yvonne's expression remained unchanged, and she did not even move the book in her hand. She was calm. Kiran felt like his heart was being pricked by needles. When a woman was this flawless, she would be able to render a man utterly powerless. Yvonne was exactly that. She seemed ready to embrace anything in this world, causing Kiran, a blindly courageous man, to hesitate to lay a finger on her. That was what made her so fearsome. Kiran did not feel any ill intention from her, so he did not display his. Instead, he was eager to solve this problem. I don't know either. Why don't we return to the Maui tribe and ask? Yvonne looked at him with her red lips slightly parted. Kiran's heart was trembling. Her question revealed exactly what he was thinking, which made her even more terrifying. He walked up to her and stared at her pale face. I want to sleep with you tonight. Yvonne was still as calm as ever. She got up and started taking off her clothes. She was even more obedient than a mistress. Kiran could not figure out what she was thinking. Was she insane? Perhaps she was a puppet, an easily manipulated marionette. Why aren't you taking off your clothes? Yvonne looked at Kiran seductively while he stood there in a daze. Nothing. I'll come get you tomorrow. We'll go to the Maui tribe. Kiran was completely defeated, so he left. Yvonne just watched him leave without saying a word. The moment he closed the door, a smile appeared on her calm face. She looked down at her beautiful, sexy, and curvy body. How was she not able to make that man's heart flutter? She slowly put her clothes back on and went into her bedroom to lie down. Her movements were gentle enough that she looked like a dead zombie. Kiran stood outside her door, listening to hear anything unusual inside, but after a long silence, he went into Lindsay's room. Lindsay was lying delicately on the bed. She did not even know what she was feeling right now. Feeling distressed. She did what she did when she recorded that video last time. Only then did the love and longing for Kiran emerge from her heart. She was feeling drowsy and was about to fall asleep when Kiran opened the door. When Lindsay heard the sound, she looked up in disbelief. She wanted to get up, but she was naked, so she quickly covered herself with a blanket. After covering herself, she started to regret it. She wanted Kiran to see her like that. Kiran sniffed the air and could immediately tell what she was doing. With an embarrassed face, she said to Kiran bravely, I was doing exactly what you think I was doing, and all I could think about was you. Kiran was stunned. He did not expect her to be so direct. Kiran, I love you. How do you expect me to behave when I've become your sister-in-law? Lindsay came out of her relaxed state and uncontrollably growled at him. If you want to be my woman, aren't you going down the same path as your mother? It's a foolish thing to do, Kiran sneered. Shut up, I don't believe what your mother said. My mother has been fasting and meditating for as long as I can remember. It's impossible for a kind woman like her to do something like that, Lindsay retorted. fasting and meditating. Kiran was surprised to hear that. Looking at Lindsay, he said, "Why don't you have your mother's kindness?" "What's it to you?" Lindsay yelled angrily. "Are you more like your father? You don't have to know. I came here to talk to you about two things." Kiran changed the subject as he did not actually care. Lindsay wanted to flirt with him, but seeing as he did not care, she felt even more upset. She suppressed her feelings and looked at Kiran angrily. "What is it?" "Firstly, remember to build Goodwill Creek Medical Center within 7 days." "Why you—" Lindsay almost exploded. Was that her only purpose? "Secondly, I will go to Maui with Yvonne tomorrow," Kiran continued. "Why are you going?" Lindsay asked curiously. "To find out about the love spell." "Do you want to break the spell?" Lindsay asked in surprise. "Yes. Why?" "I don't like Yvonne." He turned to Lindsay and added, "Just like how I don't like you." "Fail!" Lindsay was so angry she threw a pillow at him. "To be honest, your sister is worse than you. If I had to choose between you two, I'd rather sleep with you." "You jerk!" Lindsay was shouting angrily, but she felt happy inside. "The truth is harsh. That's just how it is." Kiran turned and left. "If you lifted the spell, will you sleep with me once?" Lindsay shouted at Kiran as he turned away. "I'll think about it." "Thank you, Master." Lindsay was overjoyed, and her eyes were filled with anticipation. Kiran opened the door and walked out. When he looked at Yvonne's room, his smile grew wider. Yvonne was lying on the bed with her fists clenched. She could sense Kiran's emotions too, but not as much as Lillian. They were both under the love spell in the end, but the love spell in Lillian enabled her to sense even more. Yvonne's fate spell was relatively weaker, but she still heard what Kiran said to Lindsay, so she was furious. She did not know that Kiran was testing her to see what she thought about her sister. He still did not believe that they were sisters. In fact, if it were not for the poison Yvonne injected into her in the bathroom, the results might have been different. When Kiran returned home, Snow was curled up on the sofa waiting for him to come back. Kiran's heart was aching, but he still smiled. "I'll hug you to sleep right away." "I'm happy you're back." Snow's eyes were teary as if she had been holding it on until now. Kiran hugged her in his arms. "I'll go to Maui with Yvonne tomorrow, so you can just stay at home. I'll ask Lillian to protect you." "You're going to Maui with Yvonne?" Snow was reluctant. "I need to find out about the love spell. Once I lift the spell, we can be husband and wife." Kiran hugged her. Snow smiled happily and hugged him back tighter. "I'll wait for you. I love you." Kiran kissed her forehead. This was true love, serene as water yet profound. The next day, Kiran and Yvonne drove to Maui. Chapter 454. Kiran drove Yvonne's car while she sat in the passenger seat, dressed as usual. She was as calm and as pale as ever. If she closed her eyes, she would have looked like a dead person. Apart from fear, Kiran was also shocked by her strong mentality. He was strong too, but not as strong as her. Even Lillian was not as strong as her. "Why aren't we taking a plane?" Kiran broke the silence. "If the spell is lifted, you and I aren't tied together anymore, so we don't have to be afraid of having any interactions with each other. Isn't it a good idea to spend some time with me?" Yvonne asked. Kiran was at a loss for words. "Kiran, have you ever thought about death?" Yvonne suddenly asked. "I have. Why do you ask?" Kiran asked back. "Nothing. I just want you to know that for some people, being alive is as good as being dead," said Yvonne. "That's a matter of personal values." "I don't think it's important," Kiran responded decisively. Yvonne shook her head. "It's not a question about value. What is it then?" "Nothing is sadder than a withered heart." "Are you saying you don't want to end our relationship?" "I've endured so many years of pain. What do you think it was all for?" "I thought you were already used to such a life." "Am I?" Yvonne asked. Kiran was confused. Something was different about this woman. "Do you have a way to lift the spell?" Yvonne asked. "No." "Do you?" "Me neither. Maui is big and populous, so I'm sure we'll find a way." "You can try. If there's a way, that'll be great." Yvonne's tone changed again. Kiran could not figure out whether she was relieved or not. He was completely puzzled. Yvonne closed her eyes and stopped talking. The car fell silent again, but Kiran still felt unsettled. They headed toward Maui. To save time, Kiran only rested for a short while, so he was on the road practically the entire time. At about 10 o'clock, he was feeling too sleepy, so he stopped by a creek and went down to answer nature's calls. After he was done, he swayed twice to shake off the water droplets and pulled his pants up when he suddenly saw Yvonne's shadow beside him. He quickly turned and saw her picking up a stick. Kiran felt chills down his spine. How could he have no idea that she was beside him? She was terrifying. Yvonne smiled faintly. "You've seen mine, so it's only fair if I see yours." Before Kiran could speak, Yvonne had already picked up the stick and went to the stream. She raised her left hand as if she were spreading something into the water. Soon, fish were swimming over to her, and in an instant, she pierced several fish with her stick. Kiran was surprised by her moves. Even he could not achieve such a feat. It seemed like she was spreading bait into the water. Bait? Poison? Kiran was stunned. Yvonne had completely mastered black magic at this point. His shock did not subside. He saw Yvonne's delicate hands move across the fish's body, and their scales fell off, revealing their raw flesh. She started cleaning the fish. Kiran became even more curious about the weak-looking woman in front of him. However, he did not just stand there. He helped start a fire. Soon, Yvonne started grilling the fish. Kiran wanted to help, but she refused. In the eyes of Maui women, men should be treated respectfully. "Since you're my man, I should take care of you," Yvonne spoke softly like a good wife. Kiran looked at Yvonne. Her beautiful face, innocent eyes, and slender legs wrapped in jeans were illuminated by the fire. She looked like an obedient and gentle wife, making it difficult for any man to bear the thought of hurting her. However, this woman was driving him to the brink of madness. Soon they could smell the aroma of the fish. Yvonne tore a piece of the fish and handed it to Kiran. Kiran hesitated, trying it. "Are you scared?" Yvonne smiled and asked. Kiran shook his head. "Open your mouth then, my man," Yvonne said. Although she sounded flirtatious, he had no reason to refuse, so he ate some. "Aren't you afraid that I'll poison you?" Yvonne said to him affectionately. "Nope," Yvonne nodded. "Thank you for trusting me," she continued feeding him. Kiran was feeling embarrassed. He wanted to do it himself, but Yvonne did not let him. Just like that, she fed him the entire time. Kiran still held firm on his decision to break free from the love spell and part ways with her. Besides, her gentleness right now bore a striking resemblance to her past frail and sick self. He recalled the time when he treated her illness, only to find out later that she was practicing black magic. She was truly unfathomable. He was deeply shocked. "Isn't it nice to enjoy the taste of the fish and savor this wonderful moment together?" "Why are you getting distracted?" Yvonne said softly. Kiran was eating the fish while looking at this incomprehensible woman. He had a strong urge to tell her to let him go and reveal what her true intentions were. However, this woman was as mysterious as the ocean. If she got involved in his family feud, things would get complicated. "Can you call me Evie?" Yvonne smiled, as bright as a flower. Kiran shook his head and refused. "Stop being ridiculous! Kiran, since there are so many women around you, who do you think is prettiest?" Yvonne changed the topic. "Lillian, who do you love the most?" "Snow. What about me? What do you think of me?" "Memory deleted," Kiran said bluntly. Yvonne smiled and ate a piece of fish. She smiled at Kiran and said, "You're adorable. You're not. Is that why you deleted your memory?" Kiran nodded. "When I die, will you have no memory of me at all?" Yvonne stared at Kiran. Kiran was stunned, but he did not feel anything, as if Yvonne's life and death had nothing to do with him. Yvonne's expression was calm, but her heart started to hurt. How could he not care about whether she was dead or alive? She rolled her eyes and spoke. Chapter 455. "Kiran, if the love spell can never be lifted, will you marry me?" Yvonne asked. Kiran shook his head. "I don't mind doing it together with you and Lillian." Yvonne paused and said, "If Lillian agrees, that is." "Well, I don't agree," Kiran rejected. "Do you really just love snow?" Yvonne's expression remained unchanged, but her heart was filled with resentment and envy. "Yes. If I transfer the spell onto Snow's body and let her endure the pain, would you agree?" "Aye." Kiran froze. "You should know that my condition is the result of black magic. If you're okay with it and she's okay with it, I can help you," Yvonne asked. Kiran quickly shook his head. "That won't be necessary. I will never make Snow suffer. I have suffered for so many years. Have you ever thought about how I feel? Do you not feel bad for me?" There was a hint of resentment in Yvonne's voice, and she was getting worked up. "I've thought about you feel. That's it. Sigh. I guess it's just my fate. I've been abandoned by my parents when I was a child, and I grew up to love someone who didn't love me." Yvonne stood up, holding a fork with fish bones on it. Kiran felt a sudden danger, so he got up and woo. Yvonne moved first. Kiran wanted to take action, but he saw Yvonne throwing the fishbone into the darkness. Bang, bang, bang. Loud screaming was heard. Boom! Kiran saw their car exploding. He looked at her in shock. "Who's trying to assassinate us?" "It doesn't matter who," Yvonne said to Kiran. "What do you mean?" Kiran was stunned. "If Lillian can be your older sister, I can be your younger sister. Do you not want to remove the poison?" "You can't. Even if the threads of fate wanted to break the dual female love spell, it won't work." "Why?" Kiran asked, but he had a terrible feeling. "Don't you get it? Did you use the eternal vow of poison to cast this love spell?" Kiran was filled with immense dread. Yes, the love and hatred planted by the vow of poison is so deep that if we aren't together, we would have to die. Why did you do this? It's not my fault, Yvonne sounded solemn, looking at the burning vehicle. Someone wanted to use this love spell to harm you and your family, but I wanted to use the love spell to find true love and let you know that I love you. Everyone does it for a different purpose, so our methods are different. She sighed and continued, I used to hate this love spell, but after when I found it was you, I came to love it. She lifted her hand and said, I've never killed anyone with these hands before. I've only ever let the golden dragon take care of it for me, but today, I killed people for you. You don't have to love me back, but I must let you know that I'm willing to do anything in this world for you and I'm willing to change. Yvonne looked at Kiran. What she said sounded sincere and even touching. What you're doing is useless. I won't be swayed, and I won't accept you, Kiran said firmly. You know that Lindsay and I aren't sisters, Yvonne told Kiran. Kiran was shocked. How do you know I didn't believe that? Because you know, Yvonne repeated. What are you trying to say? Kiran was as confused as ever about this woman. I'm a product of the poison. People are inferior to this stream sometimes. At least fish can grow in the stream. Too bad, in your heart I'm nothing. Yvonne gazed at the stream. We're not destined to be together. That's all there is to it. I don't care what you say, but I need the identity of the Ludwig family to be a part of them and find Power Hub, Yvonne said to Kiran. You want to infiltrate them? Kiran was shocked. Yes, Yvonne said with a hint of annoyance. Since you don't like me and I can't be with you, I hope that I could at least be a little helpful by being in their inner circle. Why are you doing this? I only have snow in my heart, said Kiran. You're the only one in my heart. Yvonne looked at Kiran with a smile. Kiran was speechless. I never intended to go to Maui with you. I just wanted to spend some time with you, grill fish for you, and feed you. I want you to know that I can be a caring woman too, and I want you to know how much I love you. Yvonne looked at Kiran affectionately. Kiran was silent. Kiran, I don't know what will happen when I return to the Ludwig family, but I'll let you know. Yvonne paused. Let me know what? I'm the rightful mistress of the York family. After saying that, Yvonne hugged and kissed Kiran before disappearing into the darkness. Kiran looked at her silhouette, not knowing what to say. Until she was completely out of sight, Kiran's mind was still in chaos. As always, he was still puzzled by that woman. Kiran walked to the car and saw that the fire had burned everything. There was no trace of the person who did that. He went to the place where the attackers were killed and found no bodies. It was as if nothing had happened. Kiran looked in the direction Yvonne left and wondered what she was going to do. However, he knew that she would make him even more passive because she was simply too unpredictable. Kiran did not return. Instead, he walked toward the dark mountain and he felt some sort of energy. He must make it to Maui. He would not give up halfway. The weirder Yvonne behaved, the more he wanted to find out why. Not to mention, he realized that even without his medical skills, he simply could not be affected by the poison. Kiran had the sudden urge to kill. Yvonne stood in the darkness, clenching her fists and trembling. Kiran, do you know what women can't tolerate the most? Why do you have to go and fall in love with another woman? How am I inferior to Snow? Damn you! I'll make you kneel before me one day, and you will repent and regret what you did. Yvonne looked up at the night sky. Kiran is mine. She stepped into the darkness and set off to Maui in pursuit of the light within her heart. Little did she know. Chapter 456. Kiran headed in the general direction of Maui, directly taking a route through the mountains. For him, this was more convenient than driving. He entered the mountain and darted through it, all the while sniffing the air for the faint scent he had smelled in the car. The explosion had occurred out of nowhere, and he had been too distracted by Yvonne. Otherwise, those people would not have been able to get close. As he moved ahead, he searched for the faintly discernible scent. Just as he neared a pile of rocks, he caught a whiff of a stench and immediately stopped in his tracks. Phoo! A gust of wind whooshed past. The stench grew stronger, along with the surge of murderous intent. Kiran took 2 steps back, looked around, and found himself looking at a tiger. Having grown up in the mountains, he was not afraid of a mere tiger. What shocked him was its size. It was gigantic, about 1.5 times the size that of a normal tiger, and estimated to weigh as much as 2. He glanced around and saw that it was alone. Thinking that it was just one of the mountain forest's wild beasts, he ignored it and began to walk away. Grah! With a roar, the tiger launched itself into the air and lunged for Kiran's head with its front claws outstretched. Kiran did not want to hurt the tiger, so he dodged it and continued to move forward. Snap! Having missed its target, the tiger slammed into a tree as thick as a bowl and split it. Kiran was secretly astounded by its strength. If he had been struck, his body would probably have ruptured into pieces. He began to run faster to throw the tiger off. However, the tiger pursued him relentlessly and picked up its pace as if it had been provoked. Kiran plucked a leaf and shot it at the tiger. With a thwack, it hit the tiger on the forehead. Although the force was not strong, it still hurt enough for the tiger to let out an anguished roar. Thinking it would be scared now, Kiran halted and looked over his shoulder. To his surprise, the beast's mountainous body leaped again at him. Kiran was stunned. Was this tiger not afraid of death? Still, he did not move and only stared at it. Suddenly, he noticed a glint of blue in the tiger's eyes. Blue? Poison? Maui? Many suspicions instantly flashed through his mind, and he no longer disregarded the tiger. Right before its two front paws touched him, he shifted slightly to the left and at the same time jabbed a silver needle into its body. Grah! The tiger yowled and collapsed to the ground with a thud. The ground shook violently, crushing clusters of small trees. Rarg! The tiger roared twice in pain. Kiran turned and continued briskly on his way. Given the power he had used, the silver needle would lose its effect after an hour. He had no intention of killing the tiger. When he was about 300 feet away, a bearded man with gray hair appeared next to the tiger. After feeling the animal's coat, he pulled out the silver needle and inspected it under the moonlight with a vicious expression on his face. The tiger got up and glared in the direction where Kiran had disappeared. You will eventually die on this mountain. The man put away the silver needle and patted the tiger on the head. Let's go. They headed for the left side of the mountain. Kiran decided to climb over the unknown mountain in front of him. According to his judgment, he would arrive in Maui after passing over it. Halfway, he heard heavy footsteps in the trees, much like a hammer pounding the earth. He quickly stopped and glanced in the direction of the sound, only to see a black bear emerge. This black bear was larger, but like the tiger, its eyes glowed blue too. Kiran was starting to find this place a little strange. Was there something happening on this mountain? When the bear spotted him, it raised its paw to swat him without hesitation. Refusing to waste time, Kiran hurled a silver needle out again, lodging it in the bear's stubby neck. The bear snarled in pain as its paw reached instinctively for its neck where the silver needle struck. However, before it could touch its neck, its massive body toppled limply to the ground with a thud. Kiran was already on his toes after his consecutive encounters with the tiger and black bear. He kept scanning his surroundings vigilantly. Just then, he caught a glimpse of red. He stopped and took a closer look, only to realize there was an army of red ants crawling on the ground. They were the size of normal ants, but their bodies were unusually red, redder than the fiery sunset. More importantly, wherever these red ants went, there would be no living creatures, and the grass would immediately wilt. Blood ants? Kiran paused in his step. According to legend, this type of ant carried a strong, corrosive poison that could instantly kill all living things upon contact. However, there had been no record of blood ants for a long time, so it was astonishing to see an entire colony at this moment. Kiran backed away swiftly. What a mysterious mountain! The blood ants seemed to pay no attention to his presence and went on their way. Although some of them would crawl back and forth, they were generally headed in the direction of the black bear. Given their corrosive ability, if they climbed onto the bear, it would die. Hastily, Kiran flung his arm out and, with invisible power, removed the silver needle from the bear. The bear instantly regained freedom as if a rope binding it had been untied. It scrambled up and made to attack Kiran, but when it saw the blood ants, it whirled around and fled as if it had seen a monster. Kiran was even more staggered to see this. Apparently, these blood ants were so formidable that even a black bear was frightened of them. He raised his head and gazed at the mountain. What mountain was this? Why were there such ferocious beasts and poisonous ants? When the blood ants perceived that the black bear was gone, they began to crawl around aimlessly. Soon, they shifted their target to Kiran. When Kiran saw them inching toward him, he did not dare to linger. With a deep breath, he jumped up and over the line of ants. As soon as he landed, some scattered blood ants started moving toward him. He hurriedly waved a hand over the ground, sending the plants and blood ants on the ground flying with a hurricane-like blast of internal force. The sound of what seemed like clothes tearing filled the air as the bodies of the blood ants were ripped apart. The bright red liquid inside them spattered all over the trees and flowers, killing them right away. Kiran could not stop his scalp from going numb. These blood ants were absolutely terrifying. Roar. At that moment, the roar of a tiger came from the distant mountaintop. A tiger? Kiran instinctively glanced down the mountain. There was no response from the foot of the mountain. The contemplation on his face vanished and was replaced by a cold smile. He was going to take the bull by the horns, or rather the tiger by its canines. Chapter 457. Kiran took a deep breath and started ascending the mountain swiftly. At this moment, he was more curious than anything else about this mountain before him and bursting with indescribable eagerness for new discoveries. Like an arrow, he darted through the montane forest, the trees and flowers whizzing past his ears. He moved fast but maintained a high degree of concentration. Just when he was about to cross a ravine, shadows jumped down from the surrounding trees with a cacophony of howls and chatters. Kiran glanced up only for his vision to be filled with red, the red of monkey butts. He moved to scatter them and break through their encirclement. To his horror, the monkey's urine and feces began to rain down on him at the same time. Suppressing the urge to throw up, he waved his arms to form a blast of air that repelled the excrement above, then prepared himself to leap up. Woo! Just then, a shadow streaked toward him, aiming its vicious claws directly at his shoulders. A condor! Kiran recognized what it was right away. The condor's sharp talons were spread wide like iron hooks and about to land on his shoulders. With a sweep of his arm, a silver needle flew out and struck the condor's head. Flap, flap! Beating its wings rapidly, the condor plunged toward Kiran like a huge ball. Because Kiran had shot the silver needle upward, he froze momentarily in mid-air before beginning to free fall. The condor plummeted like a bomb dropped from the sky, its massive body about to engulf him. With a forceful twist of his waist, Kiran dodged the bird in mid-air. As for the monkeys, they leaped toward him as if they had found their target. Kiran was exasperated. Had all the animals on this mountain become spirits? All he could do was descend quickly into the ravine. According to his plan, he would find somewhere to regain his footing and then spring back up. Therefore, he allowed himself to fall at a controlled speed. However, he soon discovered that something was wrong. There seemed to be nothing beneath him and no place where he could stand. The monkeys, on the other hand, had cleverly bounded off in separate directions. At that moment, a thought occurred to him. The condor he shot had fallen faster than him, but up till now, he had not heard the crash of it hitting the ground. Was the valley that deep? He was suddenly overcome with unease. He looked around, but all he could make out were vague shapes of rocks that glinted eerily. Abandoning the idea of making a jump for them, he fished out several silver needles to control his body's descent. This place was getting stranger and more dangerous. Bam! Finally, a sound of impact came from the depths. He knew it was the sound of the condor hitting the ground. He sucked in a sharp breath to make his body heavier and accelerate his descent. After about half a minute, he heard the sound of running water below. He knew he was about to land. It was pitch black beneath, except for a glimmer of moonlight reflected off the water. Taking advantage of the light and the sound of water to determine his location, he aimed for an open space nearby and sprang over. When his feet touched the ground, he heard a louder noise from the water. He took out his cell phone and turned on the flashlight. Immediately, he was greeted with the sight of bright red blood and feathers littering the water. The condor's fall had shattered it into pieces. However, what really made Kiran sick was the school of black-headed fish in the water, their mouths hungrily eating the condor's carcass. He shifted closer to observe them, but they raised their heads and eyed him as if they intended to attack him. Once again, Kiran's curiosity was piqued. What bewildered him even more was the similarity between this cave and the one in Dragon's Mount. He decided to head upward to the source of the river, but found there was no path for him to walk, only the river stretched before him. He lowered his head to look in the water, but it was pitch dark. All he could see were numerous black fishes swimming toward the condor's carcass in the lower reaches as if it were some delicious food. He glanced over his shoulder as the sound of a scrimmage downstream reached his ears. Although he did not see it with his own eyes, he could imagine the fish were fighting over the condor's body and even harming their own kind in the process. The stench of blood permeated the cave. After pondering for a moment, Kiran searched his body and found a bag that had been used for takeout the day before. Marveling at his luck, he slipped his phone inside and swiftly dived into the water. As all the black-headed fishes had all gathered downstream, there were none where he was, however. The water was icy and reeking, making him feel suffocated. Holding his breath, he quickly swam upstream. He had no idea how deep the water was, but he managed to swim to his destination without a hitch. Sensing his presence, the black-headed fish immediately swarmed toward him like wild beasts to their prey, eager to tear him apart. He picked up his pace. After passing through what looked like a gate, he entered a larger cave. He exhaled. It was even more similar to the cave in Dragon's Mount than he had expected. He hauled himself out of the water right before the black-headed fish arrived. Unable to attack him, some jumped onto the shore and writhed about, trying to eat him. Kiran was shocked by their greed and bloodthirstiness, but he had no time to bother about them. He pulled out his phone, flashed its light onto his surroundings, and caught sight of a wall of rock that glowed red. He approached it and touched it with his hand. It was rock, However, the next instant he was startled to feel the coolness of jade flowing from the wall into his palm. His face lit up with joy. Could this be another dragon's mount? He placed his hand on it and felt it carefully. He even shone the light on it. The bright red rock looked like it had been painted with fresh blood. The only difference was that this color was deeper and richer than the color in Dragon's Mount. Kiran could not tell the direction at this moment, but from his observation of the red jade's pattern, the thickness seemed to differ. Was it thicker on the west and thinner on the east? What if it was thinner on the east? Wasn't that the direction of Bayville? To the west was the lands of Maui, where he was headed. Once again, he used his phone's flashlight to examine the wall. Although the red jade was crystal clear, there were faint traces of red clustered together like red scales. Realization dawned on him, and his eyes shone with delight. Was Dragon's Mount actually a dragon itself? Chapter 458. The mountain is not a mountain and the dragon is not a dragon. There are no dragons in the mountains, yet dragons exist all the same in the mountains. Kiran recalled the 2 lines at the beginning of the secret records of Dragon's Mount. The truth was starting to dawn on him. The next instant, he remembered his father's words that Onyx told him, mountains aren't mountains and water isn't water. Both mountains and water are but a dream. Mountain? Wasn't he on a mountain now? Water? Wasn't there water here? Weren't both mountain and water present now? The mountain is not a mountain. Did that mean this was no normal mountain? The dragon is not a dragon. Indeed, the stretch of jade here did not resemble a dragon. If it was not a dragon, then there was no dragon in the mountain. However, if dragons exist all the same in the mountains, wouldn't that mean there was a dragon in this mountain? At that moment, Kiran finally figured it out. Apparently, Dragon's Mount was just a mountain, but it was more prominent because it was a part of a whole. Kiran took a deep breath to calm down as speculations began to form in his mind. The terrain of this country was higher in the west and lower in the east. In ancient legends, the country's 2 mother rivers were symbolized as 2 dragons. Bayville was situated right at the mouth of the sea. That was where the dragon's tail was. According to that rationale, that would make Dragon's Mount the dragon's tail. Kiran's thoughts were starting to clear up. He also recalled the different content of the pages numbered 7 in the secret records. In Margaret's first edition with the serial number 7, the 7th word of the 7th line on the 17th page was 9, while in Yvonne edition it was dragon. In Zachary's 5th edition with the serial number 57, the word was steel. 9, dragon, steel! As Kiran murmured to himself, his eyes grew brighter. Are there 9 such mountains, and these 9 mountains form a complete dragon? He clenched his fists in excitement, his eyes shining with expectation. If there were really 9, then it would mean that the secret records were correct. Moreover, he was certain that the York family had discovered this secret back then, which was why they halted Dragon's Mount's development plans halfway. However, it was too late. After all, this concerned the destruction of an energy pit. When his father realized it was not safe, he stopped and told Onyx to leave and deliver that message to Kiran himself. All of this made sense to Kiran. After further contemplation, he gathered that the actions of the York family had offended the authorities, which explained the deliberate disregard for the family's downfall. That was what had happened. Having figured everything out, Kiran balled his hands into fists in grief and indignation, but he did not know if he should be angry. What should he even say? Who should he direct his fury at? After all, individuals and families were not as important as the country. The country's interests were above everything else. At this moment, his heart was filled with conflicting feelings and, more importantly, a strong sense of responsibility. No matter what, at least the current situation had proven that his trip to Maui was a good thing. He sat down in the cave, turned off his phone, and began to mull over everything. All kinds of deductions ran through his mind, and eventually he settled on the image of a dragon. Bayville was just the dragon's tail, but if a mere dragon's tail had resulted in the York family's ruin going unnoticed, it was clearly a hornet's nest that could not be poked. In that case, PowerHub's investment could only mean that it was planning to destroy the dragon. Destroy the dragon? The question mark in Kiran's mind only grew bigger, and he even started considering the involvement of more powerful extraterritorial forces. Was PowerHub really taking advantage of the Ludwig family? PowerHub. A hub for converging power. A chill ran down Kiran's spine. Had Lillian instructed him to grow his finances because she knew this? What about the Imperial Dragon? Given their combat forces, were they planning to conquer this dragon and harness its power? In his mind, a clear image of the Imperial Dragon and PowerHub gradually began to take shape. Both forces were like sharp swords. One wanted to harness and control the dragon. The other wanted to control the country's economy and lifeblood. I see! The enlightenment sparked a surge of vehement and dauntless heat in his eyes. Now he had unraveled more mysteries and understood the truth better. I, Kiran York, will revive the York family and crush your dreams in Bayville. His eyes blazed with fighting intent. He had already decided the course he would take. He was going to rise up in Bayville, fend off Power Hub, and at the same time wait for an opportunity to eliminate the Imperial Dragon. Even if he were to lose his life accomplishing these two things, he would have no regrets. "Just you wait," he snarled, his expression turning cold and arrogant. Now he finally understood everything. He approached the red jade and put his hand on it. It was still cold, but he seemed to feel a hopeful force of vitality coming from it. Raging with fighting spirit, he circled the cave again but found no other exit. Since the black-headed fish had gathered there, obviously waiting to eat him, it was going to be a challenge for him to get out. In the end, his gaze fell on the two fish that had jumped onto the shore and died. Raising his hand, he released a blast of internal force, shattering their carcasses and sending them plopping into the water like delicious food. Immediately, the other black-headed fish surged over and began to devour them like crazy. Kiran seized the opportunity to jump into the water and swim away. This time, he followed the direction of the current to see where it took him. The black-headed fish pursued him for a while before finally giving up. Kiran swam all the way out and found himself back at the place where he had parted ways with Yvonne. When he climbed ashore, he saw that his car had been burned to a black shell. After scanning his surroundings, he started for the road to continue his journey to Maui. However, his mind was already much clearer. As long as he was the first to secure critical information, everything else would revolve around him. He finally had a better understanding of his family's vendetta. He was now the one in the driving seat. At this moment, he was immensely relieved. He trekked ahead under the night sky, alone yet relaxed and cheerful. This was the happiest he had been since he descended the mountain. Honk! Suddenly, a car horn blared behind him. He quickly halted and turned to look. An off-road vehicle skidded to a stop before him, the friction creating an unpleasant smell of rubber. He was startled. Why was this person driving at night without turning on the lights? If the lights had been on, he would have noticed the car and avoided it. The car stopped, and a woman in a red dress hopped out. From her hazy silhouette, he could make out her short hair, which gave her an air of shrewdness. Chapter. "Hey, why are you walking out here without a flashlight?" The woman in red grumbled, stomping her foot. Kiran burst out laughing. He was finally able to perceive that she was only about 20 years old and had an adorable oval face. Most importantly, this chick's way of thinking was rather strange. He raised his hand and pointed at her car. "Well, you brought a flashlight, but you didn't turn it on." "What flashlight?" "Besides, I was driving." The woman stopped short, only then realizing that she had been driving without turning on the headlights. Her pretty face reddened immediately. "My headlights are broken." It was obvious to Kiran that she was lying, but he merely smiled without exposing her. "How far away is the nearest city?" He had originally meant to traverse the mountain to reach Maui, but now that he had swum back along the current, he could not attempt to climb the mountain again. Besides, he was reluctant to harm those wild beasts which he believed were protecting the mountain. "Why are you all wet?" The woman eyed him in confusion. "I accidentally fell into the water just now." The woman did not doubt him and glanced into the distance. "It's over 6 miles away. Why don't you ride in my car?" Kiran, who had intended to hail a cab, was surprised by her offer, and his impression of this young woman improved significantly. "Thanks, then. Get in." Without hesitation, the woman wheeled around and got into her car. Kiran clambered in after her. The woman started the car and turned on the lights. At once, the road ahead became as bright as day. "Huh! The headlights are suddenly back to normal!" She pretended to be astonished. Kiran knew she was covering up her mistake, but he did not expose her. He leaned back in his seat to sleep. "Hey, are you really going to sleep at this hour?" the woman complained. "What else should I be doing at this hour besides sleeping?" Kiran was baffled. The girl blushed again, but maintained her haughty demeanor. "What I meant was, aren't you worried about a woman driving alone at night? I'm in the car with you, aren't I? If you sleep, it'll make me sleepy too," she protested in annoyance. "You have a point. How about I drive?" Kiran offered. "You can drive." The woman was delighted that she had found a helper. "Of course." Kiran grinned. "Great." The woman immediately stepped on the brakes and moved to get out of the car. However, she forgot to change the gear, and she was shocked when the car lurched forward. Fortunately, Kiran reacted promptly by shifting the gear and pulling the handbrake. The woman flushed sheepishly. I was just too tired." Kiran knew she was an inexperienced driver, a terrible one, in fact, but he mercifully kept quiet. He got out of the car and sat in the driver's seat. The woman got into the passenger seat, visibly more relaxed. She grabbed a bag full of snacks from the back seat. "Finally, I get to eat." With that, she took out a bag of potato chips ready to dig in. However, her fingers hovered before her lips, and she glanced at Kiran. "Do you want some?" He shook his head. "No thanks. Nom nom." The girl began to munch on her snack happily. Kiran envied her naivety. How wonderful it would be if everyone were so simple and free of human worries. He cast a look at her. Noticing his gaze, she moved nearer to the door vigilantly. "Aren't you afraid of driving alone in a place like this?" Kiran asked. The girl's agitation only increased at his question, and her eyes flitted to him anxiously. "How did you get so wet?" Kiran decided to teach her a little lesson on safety awareness, so he said jokingly, "I was trying to take a steamy bath with my fiancé, but the idea scared her off, so I'm the only one who got wet." "Huh?" The girl exclaimed and stared at him in fear as if he were a pervert. "What's the name of this mountain?" Kiran shifted his attention to the vast mountains outside the window to distract her. "Mount Mordor." "Mordor? As in opening the gates of Mordor?" Kiran chuckled. The woman nodded, but the wariness on her face deepened. She was clearly afraid that Kiran was a pervert, and she was even starting to regret letting him into her car. Seeing that she was scared, Kiran stopped teasing her. He had only meant to give her a warning, after all. He began to concentrate on driving. The woman was still very much on edge. She stopped eating and stuffed her hands in her pockets as if they held something important. "You need to step up your black magic game. If there's a chance in the future, I'll get an expert to give you some pointers," said Kiran. You know I practice black magic?" The woman was astounded. Kiran did not answer her question. "What's your name?" "Tell me your name first." The woman was fully on guard now. "Kiran York, from Bayville." The woman's apprehension dissipated slightly after he introduced himself and said where he was from. "My name is Aurora Sinfield." "Aurora?" Kiran said her name tentatively. "Huh?" Aurora responded right away. "Aurora. That's a nice name. The person who named you put a lot of effort into it," Kiran commented evenly. Aurora's face suddenly fell, and her eyes even turned red. "What's the matter?" Kiran regarded her. "I just remembered my aunt. She's the one who named me." To his surprise, Aurora started sobbing. She passed away," Kiran asked carefully. Aurora's tears rolled down her cheeks. "If your aunt gave you such a wonderful name, her name should be lovely too, right?" The mention of her last name piqued Kiran's interest. The former Maui saintess's name was Fiona Sinfield. "My aunt's name was Fiona Sinfield." Aurora's reply caught him off guard. Screech. Kiran slammed his foot on the brakes. "Gah!" Aurora screamed and almost hit her head on the windshield. What was that for?" she yelled, swinging round to face Kiran. "Your aunt's name was Fiona Sinfield?" Kiran repeated with a grave expression. "Yes, what's wrong?" Aurora glared at him. Kiran was full of respect when he remembered that Fiona had died saving the York family. "She was my aunt, too." "Your aunt?" Aurora was dumbfounded, but then she snorted. "You're lying. My aunt only had one younger brother, which was my father, and no sisters. The only person close to her was her apprentice. How could she be your aunt?" "She was friends with my mother, but they rarely met," Kiran lied. "Oh, really?" Aurora innocently believed him. "Really?" Aurora inclined her head. "By the way, are you heading to Maui?" Kiran nodded. "Yeah, great. I'm going there too. Let's go together." "Why do you want to go there?" Kiran wanted to know. "To find a way to save my father's life." Aurora's eyes misted over. Chapter 460. "What happened to your father?" Since she was related to Fiona, Kiran extended his concern to her. "Ever since my aunt passed away, my father has been suffering from a sleep disorder." "Sleep disorder?" Aurora nodded. "Yes. Every time it attacks, he would fall into a deep sleep like a dead man. I didn't know a strange disease like that existed. Even as a doctor, Kiran had never heard of such a disease. Back then, my mother would go to Maui to find a certain type of medicine and bring it back to my father." "What medicine?" Kiran wanted to know. Aurora shook her head. "I don't know either." She burst into a fit of helpless tears. "What happened to your mother?" Kiran frowned. "How did you know?" Aurora was taken aback. "This time, she's unconscious too." "She's also in a coma like your father?" Kiran asked. Aurora nodded tearfully. Kiran sucked in a breath and furrowed his brow in perplexion. "So basically, you don't even know what medicine you're looking for, right?" Aurora inclined her head in dismay. "As you can see, I'm a novice at driving. I only set out to save my parents." "How long have they been unconscious?" 3 days. My mother once told me that if the victim doesn't wake up in 7 days, they never will." "Where are you from?" Kiran was curious when he heard it had been 3 days. "Fox." "Why didn't you take the plane?" "I did." Aurora wiped away her tears. "I was studying in Bayville. After receiving the news, I rushed back to Fox before setting out for Maui. After getting off the plane, I found a car and drove all the way here." You're studying in Bayville? Kiran was surprised. Aurora nodded. Yeah, at Bayville Medical University. I've been to Bayville U, but not Bayville Med. Aurora felt a sense of kinship with Kiran, so she said pleadingly, Since you're such a good driver, can you take me straight to Maui's Clearwater Cave? Can the antidote be found there? I don't know. Aurora shook her head and continued, My aunt's buried there. My family used to live there too, but later we moved to Fox. Got it. Kiran had subconsciously begun to treat Aurora's business as his own. Thank you. Aurora suddenly blushed and beamed at him. In the future, if you run into any difficulties in Bayville, you can find me at Xander Corporation. Just mention my name, Kiran informed her. What's your position there? Aurora inquired. To help her relax, Kiran gave her a teasing smirk. What do you think? From the grime and stench on his clothes, Aurora figured his role was not that significant. Frowning, she made her guess. Security? Kiran burst out laughing. Why don't you think I'm the CEO? Aurora shook her head. Even though I'm just a student in Bayville, I know Xander Corporation's CEO is a woman who's known as Bayville's #1 babe. You know that too? Kiran was delighted to hear that his wife's reputation preceded her. Of course, so if you told me you were the CEO, I wouldn't believe you. I see. Kiran nodded. Your analysis is correct, but let me remind you one thing. What? I'm Bayville's #1 hot guy. Peft, Aurora giggled and a pretty blush colored her cheeks. You can really tease me. I've never heard of Bayville's #1 hot guy or anything like that. Really? Even though I'm so hot? Kiran ran a hand through his hair, grinning. Aurora shook her head innocently. I've really never heard of it. Forget it then, Kiran pretended to be disappointed. He suddenly remembered that Serena was Fiona's apprentice, so he located her number and called her. The phone rang, but no one answered. Puzzled, Kiran called her again, but to no avail. Are you calling Bayville's #1 babe? Aurora probed when she saw him dialing the same number continuously. Her question abruptly reminded Kiran that Snow would probably know where Serena was, so he started a video call. It was answered after just one ring. Honey, are you already in Mawa? Snow's lovely face appeared on the screen. Honey? Aurora glanced over nosily before shooting Kiran a wide-eyed look. Isn't that Snow Xander, Bayville's #1 babe? Kiran smiled and nodded. You've got good eyes. Honey, who's this girl? Snow was just as surprised to see it was not Yvonne. My car broke down, but I got a lift from this girl called Aurora Sinfield. She studies at Bayville Medical University. She said you're Bayville's #1 babe, and I said I'm Bayville's #1 hot guy, but she didn't believe me. Pfft. Snow was amused by his words. You're such a teaser. I called to ask where Serena is. She's not picking up. She sent me home last night. Then she got a call and had to leave in a hurry. She told me she needed to leave Bayville for a few days, but I don't know where she went. Oh? Kiran drew out the syllable, looking a little uncomfortable. Did something happen? Asked Snow. She should be fine. Don't worry, Kiran reassured her. Let me try calling her. It's all right. Just focus on managing the company. I'll be back as soon as possible once I've settled everything. Okay, Snow agreed, but then hesitated. I'll tell you about Yvonne when I get back. Kiran knew she was curious about Yvonne's absence. Okay. Good night, honey. Kiran blew a kiss at her and hung up. Damn, Aurora exclaimed and shot him a thumbs up. You didn't strike me as a kept man. Kiran was dumbfounded. What? You married Snow Xander and you told me I could find you at Xander Corporation. Doesn't that mean you're a kept man who depends on her? Aurora batted her eyes playfully at him. In actual fact, she was not wrong. It was true that he did not need to worry about food or living necessities since Snow bought everything for him. That did make him appear like a kept man. Rubbing his nose sheepishly, he found Serena's number and dialed it again. Just when he was about to give up after 7 or 8 rings, she answered the call. Is something the matter? Her voice was low and somewhat tired. Where are you? Kiran asked curiously. I'm not in Bayville now. We'll talk when I get back. Bemused, he hung up and switched to video call. He wanted to see what Serena was doing. However, she did not pick up. Kiran's heart thudded in his chest. Something must have happened to her. There was only one thing that could make a woman like her so sad, her master, Fiona. Could she be in Maui? Knitting his brow, Kiran dialed her number again. This time the call went through, but a cold voice came from the other end.